guest today is the multi-instrumentalist jazz musician Robert Stillman, who started his career in Portland, Maine, but is now based in the UK. Outside of his solo work, you might have heard him play saxophone with Thom Yorke, Jonny Greenwood and Tom Skinner's project The Smile. I was surprised to learn that you are actually based here in the UK.
Oh, yeah.
And after hearing an interview with you when you were talking about living in America, you were talking about how there was like this amazing jazz club there and sort of record stores and all these things that really suited the lifestyle of a musician, especially one in jazz. And I kind of wanted to hear what it was that made you uproots and come over to here, because you're based in Kent now, which isn't exactly a hub for jazz as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. The thing that made me come to the UK is my wife. We met in the States and then I moved here to be with her. So it had nothing to do with music. It was purely a life thing. Yeah. But
how do you think it affected your music career, a big move like that?
Well, I guess it probably, so in the first few years I lived here, I was working. I didn't make too many friends, or I didn't make too many connections with people to play with, and I was sort of in a place in my life anyway where I wanted to be making music. I wanted to learn how to make music on my own, and so I think it forced me to get even more imaginative and curious about what that might look like. And I just learned a ton about I just gained different skills that all of which I'm using now that I might not have had to learn if I was in a community of people where I was able to just play all the time. So it was really hard, and I was definitely lonely, and I wanted to be playing with people, but at the same time, I think in retrospect, I appreciate the opportunity it gave me to sort of dive into solo music making, which now is huge for me. It's a big part of what I do, and so I'd say that's one thing. And then eventually, I kind of met up with people in London who I had met before but lost touch with, who are now kind of like the main guys I make music with. And I feel really grateful for that, because I could have gone anywhere in the world, but it just so happened that that I was back here, and it was sort of good luck on my part. I'm grateful for that stroke of luck. Yeah.
Did you find that the London jazz scene was an easy thing to slot in with, or was that a bit of an adjustment from working over in the States?
Well, I'm not probably the right person to ask about that. I don't really feel like I understand. I don't know if there's such a thing as a London jazz scene. I mean, I think there's a lot of great musicians many of whom play with each other and are friends with each other. But I don't feel like I'm necessarily a part of a scene per se. So I don't know. I mean, I play music with like a handful of folks who are London based, and I kind of just play with them. I don't mix too widely on that scene, probably just because I've never lived there. I've never lived in London, so I sort of play with the same kind of half a dozen people, and I really value those relationships, and I learn a lot when I go there and listen to bands, but I don't feel like I'm part of a scene per se. I know there's a lot written about London jazz right now, and I'm not really sure how I fit in. I don't think I particularly fit into that. Don't know, maybe.
But do you think that there is a scene there, or are you thinking that it's something that the press have sort of made up?
I guess it depends on what you define, how you define a scene. I mean, I've always thought of a scene as sort of a close-knit community of musicians who support each other and who collaborate with each other. And I think that exists in London, but as far as I can tell, they're smaller scenes they're smaller groups of people who they seem to be loosely geographically based. You know, I'm aware that there's a real community of South London musicians who I love what they're doing, and then there's sort of a Dalston kind of thing going on, and I you know I have I'm really I think what's happening in the press is focusing maybe on one particular part of that thing, and I think there's a lot more going on maybe than what's represented by what people think of as London jazz right now. So, but I don't know. I think these things are complicated, aren't they? I think the press like to oversimplify maybe, and I think it's benefited people overall. But I think a scene, the way I define it, is more about relationships and people working with each other and supporting each other to give music a platform. And I'm not sure the press story necessarily captures that in full. But yeah, I don't know. Again, I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I don't know. Okay. I'm kind of out here, you know, I'm kind of like a lone wolf scene-wise, I think. At least that's my perception, you know. So I don't think people place me in any particular way. But, you know, I probably know less than anyone about that, so.
Okay. Well, it's interesting you talk about the relationship thing, because when I first got into like the classic jazz records, I remember reading liner notes and being surprised by how on like a Miles Davis record you'd have Wayne Shorter and John McLaughlin and all these people, and then, you know, when Wayne Shorter would do an album, they'd be on his album as well, and it all seems to be like that whole sort of band leader setup that only really exists in jazz as far as I'm aware. Like you don't have that with rock, you don't, or sort of, you know, it feels like a really jazz world thing. And I was sort of wondering if that was, you know, how do you, when you do something like the Bog Bodies album that you did with Sean Carpio and Anders Holst, is that like when you step away from your solo work, are you like a sort of, are you approached as like a hired hand, or are you like a collaborator, or what's the sort of structure when you're writing music with those guys?
So with those guys, it's a very special situation because Sean hired me for a gig that he had just based upon a mutual friend we have in New York. And that was the first time I met Sean. And as soon as and Anders happened to be on that gig. And as soon as I played with those guys who I had never met before, as soon as I played with them, there was just something really intuitive in me that knew that those were people that I just connected with. It's hard to describe, you know, but I just felt immediately so familiar, like this very, like gut level appreciation for what their music was about. And at that point, I didn't know anything about what Anders' music was, but his playing and his whole aura, his whole vibe, you know, it just connected with me immediately the same way it did with Sean. They felt like people I had almost known like in a past life, you know. So I had the vision for us being a band, like before we'd probably played more than like 15 minutes together. I just knew it was a thing, you know. I'm usually not somebody who has hunches, like strong hunches like that, but that was a case where I did, you know, and they felt the same way. And every time we get together to play, it's like, it feels like this ancient sort of, it feels like we're drawing upon something that's just right in a cosmic kind of way. So that's a very special case. And those guys are both themselves sort of lone wolf characters. They're not, I mean, Anders is an important part of the kind of Copenhagen community of improvisers, and Sean the same in Dublin, but I think we all have a similar sensibility about being sort of individual in our approach to how we make music. Like we all three of us like working alone, and so it's a special thing that we play together. I wish we could play together more, but just the nature of being in three different countries, it's just this special thing when it happens, you know. Yeah.
Do you find when you're in the room that it is, you know, talk about this sort of deeper connection you have as musicians, when you're writing and agreeing on how the path a song will take, do you find that you agree on things, or do you ever butt heads about the way things are going?
I wouldn't call it butting heads. I think sometimes, probably somebody has an insight that, I might not have. For example, if I was to bring in something to play and somebody hears it a different way, or maybe we hit a wall with something. But with those guys, it's just like I have 100% trust in their perspective. So if they say something about, maybe a piece of music I bring in that isn't along the lines of what I originally thought, my first reaction is going to be like, well, they know something about this that I don't know. Because they really, it's just a very special, just because I feel like their musical brain and their kind of connection to things is, I just trust it on a level where I can't imagine arguing with them. Maybe it'll happen someday, but it hasn't happened yet. I think we think along the same lines, and when we don't see something the same way, it's sort of like, oh, well, that's like you're showing me something that I couldn't see it yet, but I'm glad I see it now. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like that, I guess.
If we go back to your solo work, your album came out last year, What Does It Mean to Be an American? I thought it was an interesting title because I've noticed when American people are interviewed on the news and stuff like that, they quite often start their response to the question by saying, as an American. And that's like a uniquely American thing. I'd never started a sentence with as an Englishman or something like that. I don't think so. I can't imagine why I would. But I was just wondering, that sort of made me, when I read the title of your album, that made me think maybe that was something you were commenting on or something. But could you tell me, as an album with only one song with lyrics on, what was it that made you choose a title like that for an instrumental album?
I guess the reason I sort of set that as a brief for myself, because I wanted an answer to the question for myself, So like I use things like that as ways of holding myself accountable for how I want to be or things I want to know. You know what I mean? Like, because music for me is like my number one sort of thing with music is like I'm on a sort of learning process here, and so when I'm making music, I set myself briefs to be able to work towards things that I want to achieve or that I want to make progress with, and for everybody, but maybe for Americans in particular, like that period kind of leading up to COVID. So talking about Trump, and it was the culmination of an era maybe where it was a confusing time to be American, and I it's doubly confusing for me because I don't live there. So, but it doesn't change the fact that that's what I am. So I guess I wanted to give myself the opportunity to have to think through what my feelings were about identifying as American, and despite the fact that a lot of aspects of it were uncomfortable to me. And I was just using music, like a lot of stuff on that record is not only about American identity, but it's like about identity, just period. You know what I mean? Like, there's something I'm interested in, like, the different masks that we wear, not as a negative thing, but like when we have an identity or a persona, which is like kind of the Jungian approach, like, persona is not a bad thing. It's just like, it's the thing that we put on that helps us go out into the world and have an idea about ourselves. But that persona is really fluid, and we make decisions about what those masks are and when we want to wear them. And, it's not who we are, but on some level it's who we present. we tell ourselves stories about our relationships to those masks. So I guess American is one of those things for me, and this was just my opportunity to think my way through it and use the music to kind of, I guess, as an expression of the thought process, if that makes sense.
Do you feel that the music is written from the perspective of a sort of American character version of yourself?
Well, there's no such thing. Like, when I call myself American, that's a character. Like, it's not a fictional character, it's me, you know? But it's only fictional in the sense that the me, like the capital M me, is nothing that I could name, like, I'm a musician, I'm American, I'm white. Like, you know, those things are all related to experiences that shape who I am, and are, you can't disconnect them from who I am. But I do think that there's a me that's kind of, that sits inside or behind those things, and I guess that's the me that knows how to make sense of those different narratives. I feel like I'm maybe getting myself into a muddle here. Does this make sense?
It does. I think I'm following. Yeah, I think I follow.
It's like if I can use like the cover of the album as a way of trying to explain, like, that's me looking in the mirror, and it's just a simple image. Like, when we look in the mirror, there's kind of two things going on. It's like we can either see what we want to see, we can see the image that we want to see, or we can try to look through that image and see the real us, you know? So yeah. Like, we can choose like, it's like a process. It's a process of understanding what the relationship is between the thing that's inside and the thing that we present, or the thing, you know, because all of these experiences that make us one or the other of these personae, like, we can lean more heavily into one or the other. So that must mean that they're a little bit looser than the thing that we can't choose about, you know, that is just who we are, like the big M me, you know? Yeah. I'm sure there's a more articulate way of putting this, but it's like a reckoning process. It's like the mirror, the what does Goggins call it? The self, you know, it's like the accountability. That's it. Accountability mirror. Like, you look and you have to take responsibility for what you see. And, you know, I can't not be American. That's like, so if that's the case, then I have to
accept it.
I got to accept it. It's exactly. And that's what it's about. I mean, that's one of the tunes. Acceptance. It's like, that's what it's all about, you know? And acceptance isn't about overlooking the ugly parts of it. It's about dealing with them, you know. It's the opposite. It's about, like, going through them. So yeah, I guess that's where it's at, really. But, you know, it's hard to talk about.
I read the little bio you've got on your website about the album, and I like the way that it's described as experimental in a archaic and also modern way. And just then, talking about, you mentioned acceptance, and the song Acceptance Blues, I think is kind of a really interesting example. Because if you just put that on out of context, it sounds kind of like almost honky-tonk sort of piano, kind of old worldy blues. And then as the song goes on, it sort of breaks down and becomes kind of dissonant and a little bit hard, you know, a little bit less easy on the ear. It's like, it works really well. I think it's a really interesting tune. So how do you start with an experiment that sounds so archaic? That sounds like something from the 1930s or something. How do you use a form like that and end up with something that sounds really modern?
I guess there's like a technical answer to that and a more sort of musical answer. Like, the musical answer is that the way I start out with material like that is because I've got a lot of those tunes floating around in my head, or that type of musical language appeals to me because of all the stuff I've listened to, you know. So it's probably some kind of amalgamation of music from the era that maybe it evokes. That's just part of my kind of vocabulary, because it's the music I've immersed myself in a lot of old-timey music and jazz, and you know, I don't know what the labels are, but it's coming from some combination of things I've listened to, and so, you know, then it's my decision how I process that in my own music, and for me, it often involves some sort of deconstruction process, and that's what's going on in that song. And there's lots of different ways of deconstructing material. In that case, it's using some you know, I guess it was a studio process in that case, because the melody doesn't really change. You know, there's a little bit going on with introducing some kind of ugly notes, but a lot of the ugliness in that track is introduced through feedback and that sort of thing. So, but it's a deconstruction thing, you know, like I'm trying to get inside of that sound and sort of explore it, take it apart and explore what it sounds like and what it means when it's in bits and pieces, you know, sonically, when it's kind of been made into a more elemental kind of soup, if that makes sense.
You perform on the Smiles album, A Light for Attracting Attention. And if I was going to guess, I'd say that you made that connection through Tom Skinner, the jazz drummer who plays on the album.
That's it, yeah.
So yeah, what was it first like getting in the studio with those guys, and how did that sort of take place?
Well, yeah, through Tom. Yeah, because Tom, what he did on that record is really beautiful. Like he brought together, like, Tom is kind of like a scene unto himself, because like he's been playing music in London for such a long time, and so he's made these deep connections with like all these great musicians, you know, from different kind of generations almost, and so what he did with that band is he like brought all these greats together, you know. I mean, the people in that studio for those tracks, like, it's just an incredible collection of people, you know, like Jason Yard, Byron Wallen, Theon Cross, Tom Herbert. I mean, they're just like Chelsea Carmichael, amazing musicians. So a lot of what was magical about that session is just getting all those people in the same room and making sound, you know. It was like a miracle, you know. Yeah, and he made that happen. He's a great curator like that. Like he knows, he used the opportunity to make that happen. So that's all I really like. It's hard to express like how special it was to get all those personalities and sounds in the same room, you know. It was really great. Really great.
I'd like to ask you now, Robert, what is your Who's Flying the Plane hidden gem?
Yeah, so Sean Carpio, the drummer in Bog Bodies, he made a 10-inch record, so a short record called A Wave in Time, I think.
Just a quick editor's note. Robert got in touch with me after recording to let me know that Sean Carpio's record is actually called Waves of a Present, and you'll be able to find a link to that in the description for this episode.
And it's a limited sort of thing that came out on a label in Dublin called 10 Spot, which is kind of a boutique label that just does 10 inches. So it's a very, like, you know, very limited sort of thing. But the album, I love it so much, and I love Sean's vision. I love his I love his songs. He plays all the instruments on it, and I love how he plays them. And it's just such a beautiful, beautiful record. And it meant so much to me to be listening to it before it came out. When he sent it to me kind of during like the first couple lockdowns. I was listening to it all the time, so I have a sort of attachment to it just in that time period, you know. And I worry that because it's such a limited thing, not enough people are aware of it, but it's just like a kind of a masterpiece of a record, you know. So I would say that 10-inch of Sean's, like I would shout about that as much as I could, you know. Such a great record. Yeah.
In terms of your solo work and touring and anything that you can talk about coming up, what's next for Robert Stillman?
So I'm going back out with the Smile tour back to America in June for like 4 more weeks of touring over there, kind of. And so that's me doing my solo support set before they play, and gonna do cities that we didn't do last time we were over there, which is great because I'm gonna get to go to some cities I don't know very well, like so that'll take me into midsummer, and then I'm gonna be back here. I'm working on a new record. I've been trying to finish for a really long time, and so I need to kind of plow myself into that, and also working in Tom Skinner's band Voices of Bishara. I think we've got some stuff lined up for the autumn, so that's kind of like my sort of summer, autumn, and Dave Akumu, maybe some more stuff with him as well, hopefully. So yeah, I think that's everything. Some more Bog Body stuff maybe, but just the normal stuff. It's normal, it's extraordinary, but it's the stuff I've been doing recently. So yeah.
All right, well, thanks a lot for talking to me today, Robert.
No worries. Thank you for having me.